Guantanamo Bay, moving past the War on Terror. Guantanamo Bay has been open since January 2002 and has been an international controversy ever since. Located within the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, Cuba, the prison, also known as Gitmo, was established by the Bush administration to house dangerous militants and alleged terrorists captured by U.S. forces in the Middle East. The facility has become one of the main worldwide debates due to its nominal violation of the legal rights under the Geneva Conventions and abuse of the detainees by the U.S. authorities. When Obama took office in 2008, many people thought that Guantanamo Bay wouldn't last any longer. One of his first actions was an executive order to close down the detention facility, review the cases of the detainees, and ban torture in Guantanamo. Many nations, such as France and England, have called for the United States to shut down the prison. Benjamin Witz, a research director at the Brookings Institution, states that the executive order that Obama declared back in 2008 only begins the process of making larger decisions concerning the detainees and the facility's policies.
We're going to close Guantanamo a year from now, and in the meantime, we're going to study each case of the just under 250 people who remain there. We're going to see who we can release. We're going to see who we can prosecute and in what forum we can prosecute them. And if anybody's left at the end, we're going to hold them somewhere other than Guantanamo.
But what happened? An analysis of Guantanamo Bay reveals that not only is there politics involved, but Guantanamo Bay and its detainees have been viewed as a national threat to the U.S. as well. Many different proposals have been introduced by the U.S. government, but no forward initiative has been taken to release or transfer detainees. We begin with the detainees in this dilemma. Since 2002, around 800 detainees have passed through the cage wires of Guantanamo Bay. Some were released after being proven innocent, but many others were not detained under certain processes that had not been evident in previous years. Colonel Lawrence B. Wilkerson wrote, "It was becoming more and more clear that many of the men were innocent, or at a minimum, their guilt was impossible to determine, let alone prove, in any court of law, civilian, or military." Many detainees were later found to be turned over to officials for the wrong reasons, since we relied on Afghan officials to take in the detainees in such regions, such as bounties, solving tribal feuds, or simply trying to make money.
So why not let the detainees go?
According to the U.S. Department of Justice, it is beyond the sovereignty of any United States court. Since Guantanamo Bay is located on foreign terrain, detainees do not get the same legal rights to writs of habeas corpus as applied in the American justice system. Bush and his administration argued that this poses the detainees as a high-risk threat to the world and can open pathways to finding information about terrorist groups in the Middle East. The United States government proposes that since the detainees are alleged enemy combatants, holding them without charges or access to counsel is not an act of punishment, but a security and military necessity. According to the chairperson of the working group and the special reporter of Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, the ongoing detention of the detainees held as enemy combatants creates unreasonable deprivation of the rights to personal liberty. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell worked with the Bush administration to build up Guantanamo Bay to where it's at today. In a radio interview with Steve Inskeeps of NPR Morning Edition, he admits that terrorism took us to a point where we started to act as if we were afraid of everything. His point is that terrorists have taken a toll on our nation, and we have established certain boundaries and rules to stop foreign intruders. As the Obama administration debates closing down the facility, many more concerns begin to rise. 86 detainees have recently been cleared for their release and are still in Guantanamo Bay with officials not sure what to do with them. The government must prove that the countries that will be taking in the detainees are not ones who support terrorist groups. They must also ensure that after they are released, the detainees will be monitored to prevent future terrorist attacks on the United States. Many detainees have been regarded as too dangerous, but have no sufficient evidence or charges against them to prove so. Experts such as Vijay Padmanabhan, former senior lawyer for the U.S. Department of State, question how willingly the Obama administration will release detainees. Obama doesn't want to be holding the political bag when one of the detainees engages in a terrorist attack. Along with debating this political issue, the government has to ensure the safety of our nation with releasing the detainees. Earlier in 2009, President Obama had ordered the Departments of Justice and Defense to arrange for the transfer of prisoners from Guantanamo to the Thompson Correctional Center in Thompson, Illinois. However, in 2010, Congress passed a bill that would prohibit the Obama administration from any expenditures to transfer detainees to the U.S. Another problem, according to officials, many of the detainees' homeland countries are not willing to accept them. They cannot guarantee that they will be treated humanely during interrogation periods in their home countries. As a result of this, the European Union, specifically German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier, has offered to accept detainees into Europe.
We aren't rushing to accept prisoners in Europe, but closing Guantanamo is in our interests. So I've said from the start, we should get ready to do so.
To make the scene in Guantanamo Bay on the United States bigger, the United States has violated the international human rights law, along with the Geneva Conventions, particularly the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, and the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war. The former convention provides in the context of cases of declared war or any other armed conflict which may arise between two or more of the high contracting parties. A person may be detained as a prisoner under this convention until the end of the war activities. The latter convention also allows a party, in this case the U.S., to detain civilians because they create a threat or intend to harm a conflicting party. Once the armed conflict has ended, prisoners of war must be released. The indefinite detention of detainees for interrogation purposes at Guantanamo Bay does not comply with the Geneva Conventions. Information from former Guantanamo Bay detainees can confirm that the objective of the United States government is to hold detainees as long as possible to gain knowledge about the Al-Qaeda network. The United States is party to several humanitarian acts and international laws pertaining to the situation in Guantanamo Bay. According to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, under the International Human Rights Law, Article 2 states,
"Each state party undertakes to respect and to ensure all individuals within its territory and subject to its jurisdiction the rights recognized, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status."
The Human Rights Committee has made clear that the state party has to respect the covenant and the rights given to those within power from the state party, whether or not located within the state's party territory. Correspondingly, International Court of Justice has confirmed that while the jurisdiction of the state is primarily territorial, the ICCPR encompasses acts done by a state in the exercise of its jurisdiction outside its own territory. Knowing the situation of the lease agreement between Cuba and the United States, it does not limit the responsibilities of the United States towards those detained there. Therefore, the obligations of the United States under international human rights law extend to those detained at Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay was established to house dangerous militants and foreign intruders, but has evolved into a violation of rights, law, and morality. The indefinite detention of detainees infringes on international law and codes set by the United Nations. The United States has a responsibility to ensure all detainees are tried under U.S. federal court, with writs to habeas corpus. The government also has the obligation to ensure that men have sufficient support and resources after being released. The detainees are protected under the Geneva Conventions and must be released if they do not have charges against them. Currently, the legal status of many in Guantanamo remains in oblivion. The United States must work to assure that Guantanamo is shut down with impartiality and take liability for actions against detainees at Guantanamo.
Guantanamo is not necessary to keep America safe. It is inefficient. It hurts us in terms of our international standing. It lessens cooperation with our allies on counterterrorism efforts. It is a recruitment tool for extremists. It needs to be closed.